Hello, and welcome to the Folklore and Fiction podcast. My name is Kelly MacCath-Moran. I'm a PhD candidate in the Folklore Department at Memorial University of Newfoundland, and I'm also a speculative fiction writer under the pseudonym C.S. MacCath. The Folklore and Fiction podcast and dispatch synthesize these passions with a focus on folklore scholarship aimed at storytellers. You'll find the Folklore and Fiction archive along with the rest of my work online at folkloreandfiction.com. Interested listeners will find a link to the current dispatch in the show notes, where a more comprehensive record of this episode can be found, including a bibliography and other references. This episode of the Folklore and Fiction podcast was first published as a newsletter in March 2019. I'm recording it as a supplemental podcast now so that new listeners and subscribers have an opportunity to engage with the material. In it, I'll be introducing the legend genre, with help from scholars Linda Dégh and others, contributions from the Memorial University of Newfoundland Folklore Archive, and a wee chunk of fiction by Patrick Rothfuss. Folklore scholar Linda Dégh spends no fewer than 75 pages exploring various definitions of the legend in her book Legend and Belief, Dialectics of a Folklore Genre. By itself, this is a good indication that legend narratives are widely studied among folklorists, and this edition of the newsletter certainly reflects that. But as always, my focus is on bringing folkloristics to writers, so I'm only going to offer those definitions I think might be helpful to you. Let's start with a quote from the Grimm brothers, which can be found in Chapter 2 of Dégh's book. Quote, "The fairy tale is more poetic, the legend more historical. The former exists securely almost in and of itself in its innate blossoming and consummation. The legend, by contrast, is characterized by a lesser variety of colors, yet it represents something special in that it adheres always to that which we are conscious of and know well, such as a locale or a name that has been secured through history. Because of this local confinement, it follows that the legend cannot, like the fairy tale, find its home anywhere. Instead, the legend demands certain conditions without which it either cannot exist at all or can only exist in a less perfect form." End quote. Dégh notes that in this definition, the Grimms differentiate the world of the fairy tale from the world of the legend. While the fairy tale is fantastical and not tied to a particular time or place, the legend is tied to familiar environments and populated with human beings. But the Grimm definition is not without problems. In particular, Timothy Tangerlini critiques the use of the term historical to describe legends, writing that even though they refer to real times, places, and people, and even though they purport to represent actual events, legends aren't necessarily historical. Rather, they are historicized, which means they are told as if they are true. That's a distinction with a major difference where legends are concerned. While the Grimm brothers differentiate between fairy tale and legend, the Encyclopedia of Folklore and Literature differentiates between myth and legend, again, with a focus on the latter as a narrative genre containing real times, places, and people. Quote, "Legend is a conversational narrative whose reported events are set in historical as opposed to myth's cosmological time, and whose telling makes possible debate concerning the real-world occurrence and or efficacy of the events, characters, folk beliefs, and or folk customs described. Many legends are migratory, that is, their variants are widely known across different geographical areas. For this reason, as well as the fact that legends deal typically with the ambiguous and the unusual, their plots, character types, and motifs can provide a sense of both familiarity and strangeness for those literary works and films that draw upon them." End quote. So, according to these texts, legends are narratives, stories which may be told or written as prose. Historicized, occur in the everyday world and not in a fantastical This episode of the Folklore and Fiction podcast is a preview, and you can listen to the full episode on the Folklore and Fiction website. Just click on the dispatch link in the show notes or go to folkloreandfiction.com and sign up for a free account. Thanks very much for your interest. Copyright 2019 to 2023. Kelly S. MacCath-Moran. All rights reserved unless Creative Commons licensing is specifically applied.